Hello, everybody. This is Monica Paolini from Senza, Fili, and today I have the pleasure to talk to Paul Puopolo, who is the Executive VP of Innovation at DFW International Airport. And what we're going to talk about today is what what is that wireless technologies can do in airports. Airports, like every other enterprise or location, stands to benefit greatly from digitalization, the availability of connectivity. But the question is that how actually is that going to work out? What is it they need and what is it they want to do? And this is what we're going to talk about today with Paul. So, Paul, thank you so much for taking the time to talk to us today.
Thanks for having me.
So, before we get started and talk about airports, can you tell us a little bit about yourself?
Well, like you said, I'm the Executive Vice President of Innovation at Dallas-Fort Worth International Airport. Been here for 3 years, and I currently lead an innovation program where our responsibility is to design new services and products and take them to market and operationalize them, as well as build a culture of innovation for the airport. And we spend a lot of time assessing new technologies, and so that's why I'm here, and that's why we got into the 5G and private network discussion.
Absolutely. So let's talk about it's a very fascinating job that you have. And as I was preparing for this interview, I learned that you guys have 55,000 employees, and I've been at DFW many times. I know pretty well the airport, but I would have never thought there were so many people, and all of them need connectivity. And this doesn't even include all the things you have in the airport, not just planes, all sorts of things that need to be connected. So this is not a trivial task. It's not a trivial transformation that you're overseeing there. And it's big too. And this doesn't even start counting all the passengers, which is a lot of them. So let me ask you first, what are the pain points? What is that you're moving that you want to improve?
Well, you're right, and we are quite large. So, just for the audience, we have 5 terminals, and the airport itself is 17 square miles. And so there's a lot of people, a lot of our partners, a lot of our tenants, a lot of passengers, a lot of people who use and need connectivity. And I think when we take a step back and look at the future, and we think about what is the airport of the future going to be, it's going to need to be highly connected, and that means it's going to need a very flexible network strategy, one that can meet the needs of the business partners that we have, as well as the expectations of the traveler. And when you look at what we want to do from an efficiency standpoint and running in an airport, we know that IoT is going to grow. We know that autonomous vehicles are going to be a mode of transportation in the future. We know that robotics is going to take a more active role in the future, whether any kind of automation, whether it's below the wing or above the wing in the terminals, or whether it's moving people in boxes around for our cargo business, and including AR and VR. Those are all new technologies. All of that is going to require better connectivity, which means it's going to need more bandwidth, a certain amount of latency, or the appropriate latency, and it needs all the appropriate security. And that's why we start to look at private networks and what can a private network do for us. And then when you look at 5G provides a certain level of flexibility, the amount of customization that we need, and it opens opportunities that the airport wouldn't necessarily have had in the past because of the technology. And so if I sum up why we're trying to do what we're doing, is that we're looking for better coverage. We're looking for, obviously, better control over the infrastructure and how it works and the network works. And we're also looking at a better cost and something much more efficient for the airport.
So what is your vision for innovation in wireless connectivity in an airport setting?
From an innovation standpoint, I think it's, from my vision from an innovation standpoint, is simply to build an innovation program that's integrated. And that means that we have a clear strategy, a clear process, a clear focus on what we're doing for the airport, as well as building a culture of innovation across all the airport employees. And the reason we're doing this is because technology is moving so fast. And I think companies or organizations that don't spend the time or the effort to put resources into the future will find themselves less competitive in the future. And I know that's hard because the operational challenges of today always get in the way of tomorrow's issues. So it's easy for us to kick the can down the road. But when that happens, you end up missing opportunities, or you end up missing being a leader in the space. And I think you, as an organization that doesn't spend time about thinking about innovation or figuring out where their role is in the future, will find itself to be irrelevant. And that's why private networks and 5G landed in our shop, because it was, at the time, it was an emerging technology, and we're working very closely with our IT group. But it's because we're trying to figure out this new technology and how it applies. And that is really the role of rapid learning in an innovation program. And that's why we ended up having this project within our portfolio.
Can you give us a couple of examples of things that don't work quite as well, or areas where you can really improve?
I think for us, because of the structure of our airport, if you haven't been here, every airport is different. But we're a horseshoe. We're a horseshoe type terminals, and we have 5 of those. And then they're they have large concrete barriers, let's just say, when they were constructed. And when you're on the ramp area, for example, our airline partners, connectivity on the ramp can be very difficult, particularly if you're going inside and outside in the environment. And so we want to make sure we can manage and provide that connectivity, for example, from bags moving from outside to inside, or even the workers on the ramp, that they don't lose connectivity out there. Or if a vehicle, for example, if we move to autonomous GSE equipment, the way they move, they're going in and out of tunnels and around the different terminals and around the gates. You can't lose connectivity for those autonomous vehicles. And so that's what we're trying to solve for. It's the structure and the infrastructure that we have requires a different amount of flexibility when it comes to the network.
How urgent is the need to change? Because clearly there is an opportunity there, but what happens if you don't do it? What's the risk? What's the downside?
Well, I think the downside is, one, you don't meet your partner's expectations, whether you're a concessionaire or whether you're an airline. We're not going to meet their expectations about providing the right amount of connectivity so that they can support their business. And number 2, if you're a passenger and you don't have the right connectivity, that can come back to us on customer satisfaction. Customers expect things to happen immediately, just like we all do when we go out there and we buy things online or we interact online. We expect things to happen fast, and we don't like to wait. And so you need to provide that level of connectivity. And passengers just assume and expect there to be no latency when they connect, when they come into the terminal. So there's a lot of satisfaction issues, whether it's a tenant and a client or a partner, as well as the passenger's experience.
Yeah, it's more than just your employees. It's the whole set of people that spend their days or hours or whatever at DFW. So what is the airport of the future once you have all this connectivity? What does it look like?
I think what we're seeing right now is, and when I say future, we're not futurists, but we think about the next 3 to 5 years. A lot of the work that we're doing with biometrics and digital ID, all is going to require network. It's all going to have to be network. I think when we look at sensors and passenger flow and trying to understand the movement of people and things through the airport requires a certain amount of connectivity in order for us to do that. Those are all, and again, autonomous vehicles, whether they're driving along the airport and they're ours or whether they're somebody else's, they're going to require a certain amount of latency and a certain amount of connectivity. And that's where we see mobility going, and that's where we see technology going. So I don't think the pace of technology for the future is going to get any slower than it is today. We've already seen the last 18 months how fast and how accelerated digital transformation has happened. To power all that technology and then to support all that technology requires a very flexible network strategy. And that's what we're working on here with our IT group.
Yeah. Well, and also, technology is clearly an ingredient, but also you need to embed it in your own ecosystem. Employees, tenants, airlines, eventually passengers. How is that work? How do you see that working out?
I think it's a journey. I think we're all trying to understand the new technology, and people might say 5G is not really that new. Well, it's new when you're trying to roll out a new type of technology, a new type of network. But where I think it really works well is when we have good partners, whether it's a partner who's going to help us roll out the technology, or if it's a partner who's going to work with us on a proof of concept to use it. So for example, on this one proof of concept that we're doing, we're partnering with American Airlines. And it's great that they're coming together with us to try to understand how should this proof of concept work. And part of the innovation process, and the reason why innovation is leading this with our IT group, is because it's truly a proof of concept. We have to understand the technology. We have to make sure that whatever we put in is going to work for us at DFW. It's one thing to put in a 5G network, let's say, or a private network for a building, but putting it in for 5 terminals and across 17 square miles, that's a big decision. And therefore, we want to make sure we understand the tech. We want to understand the goods, the bads. We want to make sure we design it the right way for our environment that works for us. And I think having partners on the tech side to help us understand the tech and are the experts, because obviously we might not be the experts in 5G, but also having a partner who's willing to work with us as well. And if you think about an airport, you're asking people to disrupt their operational environment to test something. And that requires a lot of good collaboration and a lot of good discussion. And you have to have that innovation mindset to get that done. So that's our approach. And I think we've been pretty successful at it with obviously the proof of concepts that we're doing right now.
Yeah, no, that's great to hear. I want to talk about the proof of concept in a second, but before, let me ask you about the issues about security and privacy, because when you start, tracking anything, people, objects, the question of privacy comes up. How do you address that?
Well, I think 5G, let's just say, as an network, is much more secure. So if you're going to go pay for something with our concessionaires, we believe that the 5G is going to provide a different level of security, or the security that's required in order for that transaction to happen. From the airport standpoint, we don't hold or capture any personal information. We're not in the business of keeping people's personal information. What we want to do, though, is facilitate the exchange of that information between, let's say, the airline and the passenger, or the passenger and the concessionaire. So we believe that's our role, and we believe that providing a much more secure environment to have that happen is important. Whether the decision to share that information really is on the passenger or on the traveler, and that's where we like to keep it. But we won't be storing or holding any of that personal information. But the network has to be secure so that we can protect it. And as far as the operational environment goes, our partners, or the airlines, for example, it's their devices, it's their information that is traveling over a secure network. And so the airport wouldn't necessarily be having access to that, but it would be making sure we provide a much more secure network for them to operate in.
Yeah, and I think that this is going to be an important point, because there's so many use cases, so many things that you can do or you have to do in an airport that, this issue is going to come up a lot of time. So let's talk about the proof of concept. And you say, you need to understand the technology before you roll it out. Well, and how it's going to work for you. So can you tell us a little bit about what is the proof of concept and why you're doing it?
Mm-hmm. Well, we're doing 3, but the first one was a ramp. Was a ramp proof of concept, was to put 5G in one of our gates and on the ramp area, and working with American Airlines to test out the connectivity for bags moving from the plane underneath into the baggage system, and working with the American Airlines devices. And one of the things the challenges that we've always had is that when you're moving around the ramp, because of the structure that we have out there, the physical infrastructure that we have, you can lose connectivity. But the beauty of 5G is that obviously it provides great latency, great coverage, and we're seeing right now that we're getting coverage across 7 gates. So one access point is providing us coverage outside across 7 gates, which is great. And we're learning, okay, how many of these access points do we need to have? Because again, our horseshoe environment, we need to think through how much hardware is going to be required. We're also learning a lot about, whether it's meeting the needs of American Airlines. Is it doing what they want it to do? We're also learning how do you install this as a proof of concept. So you remember, a proof of concept is slightly different than an operational rollout. So some of the things that we're putting in place may be temporary. That's a whole new mindset, that you're going to put in hardware or equipment to test something, and it may or may not stay. So we're running this proof of concept for 6 months, but we're learning, how much do we have to do? How effective is it? Do we have the right hardware to cover the right area? And then are our users or our clients getting what they need from the system? I think once we get all that done, we'll be able to say, okay, now how do you multiply this across 55 gates? And then how do you multiply that across then 5 terminals? Those are big decisions, which is why it's so important for us to understand the requirements, the implementation issues, the implementation costs. Is this doing what we said it was going to do? Because it's a big investment for us to move forward.
Absolutely. No, and not only it's a big investment, it's also a very different approach to wireless connectivity, because you mentioned before it's a private network.
Correct. And
That's a
managing a private
major
network,
change. Yeah.
true, it's a major change. And managing a private network is completely different than what we've done before. And I think that goes back to what I said, where 5G is positioning us to do things that we normally wouldn't have done in the past. And when I say that, that doesn't mean me as an airport or DFW might do it, but it's working with different partners maybe than we never worked with before, because the technology is different. And those partners are helping us understand what we can and can't do, or what our expertise is or what it's not, what their expertise is. So it's creating new business models, and it's creating a new approach that we hope will be a little bit more cost effective for us in the long run.
Now, other than being cost effective, what are the other benefits? Why do you think you need to have a private network? Because clearly there is much more work that you have to do on your end.
Right.
So it's not just saving a little bit of money or even if it's a big, what are the reasons why you want to move to a private network?
I think the private network enables us a little bit more control over the connectivity. I think if we actually have control over being able to put people on our partners or our clients on a private network, alleviates the bandwidth challenges that we've had in the past. And I think it gives us a little bit more flexibility to have different types of connectivity for the airport. Just because we have a private network doesn't mean we're giving up on all the other connectivity strategies. It's just one element of our overall connectivity strategy. And so that private network can do a lot for our partners. And we think that having access to licensed and unlicensed spectrum that we normally wouldn't have had before is a great value. And again, I'll go back to being able to say, well, you know what, we can work with somebody to help us slice that network where we couldn't slice networks before. So we're moving away from a one size fits all type of approach to making sure that we're providing the right connectivity, which is the right latency for the right use case that a business partner or the passenger may have. And we never had that flexibility before. That's why I go back to flexibility and control. Those are the reasons why we're exploring the private network, which in 5G allows us to do that.
Yeah, and network slicing will further allow you to do that. So not only you control the network, but you control how the network is used in a much more granular way than you could have done a few years ago.
Correct.
So
and it's exciting for us. But again, it's going to require a lot of different partners. It's going to require a lot of different discussions in order to get this done.
How does this, as your 5G private network, work or coexist with your existing Wi-Fi network, which I assume you're still going to be around?
Yes, we're still going to have our public Wi-Fi network that is already being provided to the public, and we will continue to have that. And we believe that the private network will augment that. And the good news is that today everybody's using the same network. And now, hopefully, if these proof of concepts are successful, we'll be able to separate that, which means that obviously the public will have greater bandwidth, and that will help us on the public Wi-Fi, and we'll be able to push more of the operational work to the private network, to the private side.
So, proof of concept now to understand how everything works. What is the longer plan?
Yeah, it's a good question. I mean, I think we have three proof of concepts, one obviously with the ramp, one with cargo, and then one we're going to think about inside the terminal to help support the airlines in a terminal environment. Because as I said before, a lot of the devices, a lot of the biometrics is going to need new connectivity in order to work. And then the future is maybe moving agents away from out from behind the counter. So they're going to have different devices that are going to require a certain amount of connectivity. If that happens, we're going to need to have something also inside the terminal to support our clients and our tenants. So I think it's all going to have to come together, and these three proof of concepts are going to help us understand what we need. And we're going to run these proof of concepts for about 3 to 4 months to make sure we get good data. And then after that, we have to put a business case together, just like any other idea that comes through innovation. We're going to sit down with IT, and we're going to have to write a business case that says this is how we want to roll this out. At the same time, we have to make sure that our airline partners and our tenants are interested, obviously, in having access to that as well. So it's a little bit of, you need also the tenants and everybody to want to do it, and then we need to do it ourselves, and then we also need the partners to help us execute it, and then that all has to come together in a business case. So that's the plan, and we have to do it. I mean, we know that IoT is only going to get bigger, and we know autonomous vehicles are coming within the next 3 years. So we don't have a lot of time to put in a, let's say, a comprehensive private network across our ecosystem.
So, and you mentioned before, like 3, 5 years, but so that means like you're going to be moving quickly in terms of being ready to basically cover the whole airport. I mean, I guess it's going to be indoors and outdoors as well, right?
Correct. And that's part of the discussion we need to have. What makes sense now? What makes sense next year? What makes sense the year after that? Maybe we start just within the terminals. Maybe we just start with the ramp. Maybe we focus on our cargo area. Maybe we focus on the headquarters because we all want 5G here, or maybe we have to focus on the highway or the road. But we'll prioritize the space, and that's the work that has to be done based on these proof of concepts.
Yeah, absolutely. No, that's quite interesting. Now, how is this? How do you see this changing your relationship in terms of the ecosystem, like tenants, airlines, contractors? How is that going to change?
Yeah, I think with any new technology, relationships are going to change, and we're seeing that no matter what technology we put in place. Technology enables the roles to change, and it enables people to do things that they typically wouldn't have done in the past. And I think that's what we're. Those are the discussions that we're having, and they're good discussions. I think it's different for an airport to say, you know what, we're gonna manage our own network. And when I say manage, meaning we may manage it through obviously partners, but that we're going to take a little bit more control over the network, or that we are serious about a private network and facilitating that for our business partners. And we are interested in making sure that the public Wi-Fi is up and running for everybody. I think it's just a more active role that we're playing in our ecosystem because technology is forcing us to do that, as well as customer expectations are forcing us to do that. And it's a fun and challenging space to be in.
No, absolutely. That sounds very, very interesting. Before I let you go, let me ask you a final question. What is that you have learned so far in the proof of concept? It's still ongoing, but if there is something that you say, oh, that's really surprising. I was not expecting that to see that.
On the tactical level, I think the coverage. I think when we first put it in, I wasn't expecting the amount of coverage. Now the 5G experts might say, "Oh, that's that we knew that," but I was really surprised at the extent of the coverage that we had. In other words, the 7 to 9 gates that we could cover with one access point, and the amount of coverage that we get and the quality of that coverage. I think that was really interesting to me, or I thought that was surprising. It was much more than I thought. And that's great. And that goes out a lot to the people who did the implementation. I'm also learning though that on the other side that it's tough to implement in an operational environment, particularly when you want to mess with a network. So the proof of concept itself is teaching us how to get better at moving quickly to do a test and trying not to overthink things. But there's obviously rules and regulations that we have to follow. So that whole idea of testing something in a very operational environment has been eye-opening, particularly for the implementation team.
Well, that's great to hear, and I hope we will be able to catch up once it's done and we can see what's next. So, Paul, thanks so much for sharing your thoughts with us today.
Thank you very much for having me. I appreciate it.
And thank you all for listening and watching this. And this is part of a report, a deep dive report by Senza Fili on airports and how wireless connectivity is going to improve the way they operate and they serve tenants and passengers. Thank you.